Hey everyone, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. Today I am joined by Kristina Surfus. She is the Managing Director, Government Affairs for the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, otherwise known as NACWA. And this is another one of our 2022 WWD Young Pros video interviews. If you've been watching them so far, thank you so much for watching them. And for those who haven't, if this is your first one, check out the video description for a playlist of all the videos to date, as well as some Q&As with some more details from each of these young professionals, because this is just a snapshot of what we're sharing. So let's get into talking with Kristina. Thank you so much for being here, Kristina. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on being a young pro for 2022. That's very exciting too.
It is. That's very exciting. Thanks so much. It's an honor.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your career. Could you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are? Obviously, you're in government affairs now for NACWA, but what led you to that point?
Sure. Great question. So, I mean, in terms of, I guess to kind of go back to educational background, right? I started out with kind of an interdisciplinary background, environmental analysis and policy and international relations, and really trying to get a broad view of areas that I was interested in professionally, start to kind of put pieces together, definitely sort of a systems thinker. And that's kind of the approach I've taken through my education. I worked for a number of years after undergraduate doing consulting work for land use planning and really kind of a firm that had a focus on sustainable redevelopment. And so I was bringing in pieces of environmental policy, environmental awareness with economic development, redevelopment, all of that. And that was a really interesting grounding to start out my career. It was also coming right at the Great Recession and coming out of that. So did a lot of work with municipalities, and that was a really interesting time to be working when local governments were really struggling financially. And there was all that was the economic hardship coming out of the recession. I went back to grad school and at that point really focused in on water policy. I went to a program through the School of Freshwater Sciences in the University of Wisconsin. And so this was a newish program for graduate students, really focused on freshwater sciences, obviously in particular. And there was a lot of opportunity to kind of carve your own path, to bring in programs, research from different departments within the university. And I thought that was really valuable. Coming out of graduate school, I took a fellowship through the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. It's called the Knauss Sea Grant Fellows Program. And that brings in about 50 people each year from PhD and master's programs around the country to focus on marine coastal affairs issues, mostly at the executive branch. So working in federal government, at NOAA or EPA or state or fisheries, a wide variety of opportunities for students or for graduates, but also about 10, a smaller cohort goes up to the Hill and works for committees of jurisdiction around these issues or in individual member offices. And so I did that, and that gave me some experience working on the Hill. And then coming off of that, I transitioned over to where I work now, which is the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA. And so there we are representing publicly owned wastewater and stormwater agencies nationwide on issues before Congress, EPA, and in the courts.
Yeah. So what was the catalyst that got you to do water? Like why water?
So I was always had a real interest in environmental policy, really sort of on the ground. And that's something that I really see in the water field. It's very tangible. The impacts are also really science driven, which I really strongly gravitated towards. But really looking within kind of environmental policy, I wanted to focus in a little bit more. And water appealed to me, one, because of how it's just really interesting and so many different opportunities within it. Again, the focus on science within what's going on in the field, and so much, as you know, for environmental issues, resource issues, they're really political, and water certainly can be really political, but it's also an area where I see that there's room for bipartisan solutions, room for working together, room for working across the aisle, and for working in politics and that sort of side of things. That was really important to me. And so that also helped draw me to water specifically.
Cool. Yeah, I was wondering because you talked about your previous role and then you're like, and then I got a degree in water. It's like, whoa, what happened there? But
Well, I feel like I'm definitely somebody, because you sort of gravitate towards what you know. And for me, I had always grown up around water, just really interested and curious about it. And so that kind of just has kind of carried through my life.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna go a little out of order of the questions that I had prepared here. I wanted to go into some of the things that you've done recently. Is there any recent project or a body of work that you've been working on recently that you're particularly proud of that you'd be interested in sharing with us?
Sure. I guess two things come to mind. One is all of the work that we are doing related to PFAS, which of course is a really growing public health concern around the country. And it's something where um, concern is really moving really fast. The science is lagging a little bit behind. Our understanding of risks is lagging behind. You've got the political pressures. You've got, people facing very acute health concerns. And all of this is sort of happening all the time at the states, at the federal level. And it's just been very interesting to work in and trying to advance science-based, risk-based policies and trying to be responsive of all the different things and all the different concerns going on right now. That's something that I really like working in. And unfortunately, this concern, the issues around PFAS, the contamination aren't going away. And so I think it's going to be something that continuing to work on likely for as long as I stay in this field. But that I like. It's a really important and interesting challenge, I think, to be working on. The other thing that I would say is the work that NACWA has done around integrated planning and codifying that within the Clean Water Act. That was an important development, a major update to the Clean Water Act, one of the biggest runs in a couple decades. And we think that's really important. As I look forward, it's an approach that I think is going to help over time lead to more community-driven solutions around meeting Clean Water Act obligations, allow us to be a little bit more adaptable and flexible. And I think that's an important direction for where we're moving, where we're going in Clean Water Act, in Clean Water Act enforcement and in water policy in general. So that would be my other one that comes to mind.
When I think about the communities that you're talking about too, I do think about just how many of them are small and like having that flexibility is even more important for utilities of that size
Absolutely.
where they may not have the capabilities or the capital to address some of the things and they need to help with it, right? They need the flexibility, whether time or solutions or money to allow for that. So that is, I think that's got to be critical.
Totally agree.
Could you, pivoting just a little bit, how do you feel that your generation and your peers are changing the water industry? How are you guys advancing things in ways that hadn't potentially, maybe haven't been seen before, or are augmenting things that people had done before?
Sure. I think one is sort of a look more towards out of the box solutions, more where advanced technologies can fit in and how we can be more adaptive, which of course goes back to what we were just talking about. An understanding that maybe one size fits all solutions isn't the best approach or might not work. And just kind of this interest in being innovative. And we've seen that for a long time, but it's something that I think, younger folks bringing in are bringing more to the forefront. Also, in terms of, I think, diversity within the workforce and the types of voices that are in positions of leadership, um, you know, coming up throughout the sector, I think that's something that we're starting to see some nice change in as well.
Hmm. Yeah, moving away from your work entirely, I wanted to talk about some of your hobbies. Like, what do you like to do on your free time? When you're not thinking about all of these things that you love to do for work. What are you doing to relax or to let loose?
Sure. Mostly being active. That's how I relax, ironically, but I know a lot of folks are like that. Being outside and doing all sorts of amateur sports, like running, biking, swimming, all that kind of stuff. And also DIY house projects, trying to always do something around here to fix things up outside or inside.
Yeah, interest.
I
What
don't sit still very well.
what is there a DIY project that you've done recently that you're particularly proud of?
Let's see, I built a bench for our entryway because it's kind of a weird size of a very old house. And so trying to build something that fits rather than trying to buy something that's not going to exist how you want it to. And then a lot of yard work as well, which in DC, this seems to be a never ending project. I grew up in the Midwest, which has a much shorter growing season, and it has never ceases to amaze me how much things can grow here and get out of control very quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. The yard work thing is really interesting to me too, because I know some people in the water industry like to use that as a way to make their own yard of green infrastructure and stuff like that too, which is a whole nother level of yard work.
Well, so I live in the District of Columbia, and we were able to participate here in the River Smart program, where they'll install rain gardens for a pretty nominal fee on private property to try and advance the green infrastructure goals. And so we have a small rain garden on the property, which captures from half of the house the gutter system, keeping it out of the combined sewer system. And so I'm excited to have that in the yard. I can't claim for credit for doing the work because the program actually comes out and does it for you, which is wonderful. And then you just have to maintain it yourself, which can be a burden, of course, but I definitely enjoy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, last question here. How would you cater to the next generation of water worker? What would you do to try and bring in the next generation of the workforce for the water industry?
Mm. So I think back to how I first got involved in the sector, which really just comes out of exposure to water issues when I was younger, and just kind of being out in the world, out on the water. And so I think a lot of it is that it's just making people aware of the resource that they have or the scarcity that the community is facing with regards to water, getting exposed to some of the science, some of the exciting challenges and research opportunities that are out there, and just kind of sparking that interest. And then, reaching younger generations where they're at. I feel like I don't even know where that is already, like whatever the younger kids are doing, but getting out on into community events where people are at, doing social media, like having utilities out, being more present. I think of water utilities being more present in the community and being more vocal and just getting in front of people and sparking that interest and showing the different careers that are out there. I think water utilities in particular are kind of in an interesting spot where they're so locally rooted in the community. And so you've got opportunities, coming straight out of high school all the way up to work within your community on really important issues, or to go off into different directions and to be working for private firms or research, or there's a lot of different avenues, but you can really kind of get connected right at home, right where you're at in your community. And I think that's sort of a unique opportunity in the water space to get young folks hooked.
That answer really connected a dot for me where we always talk about like the invisible infrastructure or the silent utility when it comes to water, right? They don't want to be seen or heard. No news is good news kind of a thing. But in some cases, like you're saying, being a little more in the community, being seen and being heard, not only creates that next generation of spark, as you were saying, but also like allows you to connect directly with your community. Like maybe you like sponsor a baseball game or like like bring water out to a baseball game or something like that. That's a really brilliant idea. I love that. Yeah, it really connected dots for me that I hadn't connected before. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well,
I think it's definitely something we're seeing a lot more of. For so long, it's like you said, this idea of infrastructure not being seen and utilities not wanting to be seen. That sort of means that they're doing things right and nobody's complaining. But there's really been this shift more towards getting out, talking about the good work that's going on, talking about the challenges, talking about how individual people can make decisions that then impact what's happening at their utility in their community and how they use water, how they conserve, things like that. There's just, the water sector, it's doing a lot of good. So it's getting out there and talking about all of that. There's a really great really great story to tell. And I think we're definitely starting to see a real shift in that direction. And I think hopefully that also pays off in dividends of, like you're saying, with younger generations understanding what's going on in the space and how they might be able to plug in and have a career in the field.
Totally. And I totally agree with you that that shift I've recognized in my short period of time in the water industry for sure. And it's exciting to see. I feel like we're at an inflection point, and being there is really awesome. So, anyway, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. And for everyone,
Yeah.
again, if you've been watching, check out the video description below. We have a playlist, all the videos to date, as well as some Q&As for all of them. Like I said, this is just a snapshot kind of those Q&As, so definitely check out the written pieces as well. And once again, Kristina, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.